Lydia Harden stood in the dust with her hands bound behind her back, the midday sun scorching her skin. And the first thing Elias Crow noticed was the dark bruise on her cheek and how her ripped blouse scarcely hung onto her shoulders. She didn't weep, she didn't plead, she simply wavered there in the swelter, like someone caught midway between enduring and surrendering. Elias had ridden over from his spread to speak with Sheriff Roy Harden about a vanished cow. He anticipated a brief chat and perhaps a clasp of hands. Instead, he discovered the sheriff's young bride fastened to a porch pillar like she was no more than a troublesome captive. Her lips were parched, her knees were scraped bare. The cord around her wrists had sliced deep enough to draw blood. Elias sensed his gut churn. He dismounted his horse in one swift motion. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Lydia raised her head slowly and heavily, and he glimpsed the sort of agony that steals a man's very breath. He moved nearer. "Who did this to you?" Her voice scraped out. "My husband did." "The sheriff. Roy left me here all morning. He said I earned it." The words struck Elias fiercer than any blow. He severed the rope from her wrists. She crumpled forward, and he caught her just before she struck the earth. Her frame trembled, not from dread, but from utter weariness. "Easy now. You're safe. I've got you." She flinched as he lifted her. Every part of her appeared tender or marked. Her blouse was rent in 3 spots. Soil adhered to her flesh like it had been rubbed in deep. Inside the house, he placed her tenderly in a seat. She kept her gaze lowered, ashamed of wounds she hadn't inflicted. He filled a cup with water. "Sip slowly." She nodded. The cup trembled in her grasp. He fetched a rag and wiped the grime from her arms. Her skin recoiled at the contact, not because of him, but because another had handled her with brutal force for far too many years. When she at last met his eyes, he saw something that rattled him to his soul. Not terror, not disgrace, something graver. A hushed resignation that this was the existence she was meant to bear. Elias felt fury building in his chest, steady and fierce. This was the sheriff's handiwork. The fellow vowed to safeguard others had thrashed his own spouse and abandoned her bound like a beast. Elias drew a breath, striving to temper the blaze in his tone. "Lydia, what in heaven's name transpired here?" And what she murmured next would alter everything. But the true question lingers here. When the sheriff returns and the facts at last emerge, will Elias be the fellow who turns aside or the one who places himself between her and the fiend she wed? Lydia perched there in the wooden seat with her wrists unbound at last, but her shoulders still hunched as if bracing for another strike from the shadows. The room was still. Too still. Only the ancient clock on the wall ticked away, like it was measuring down to some grim event. Elias could feel his heartbeat in his throat. He hadn't witnessed a woman so battered since the old border skirmishes, and even then, most had kin to champion them. Lydia seemed as though she'd never had a soul in her corner. He soaked the rag in cool water once more. This might smart a bit. She nodded. "Go on. I'm accustomed to harsher." Those words sliced deeper than any gash on her flesh. Accustomed to harsher? Accustomed to it? As he tended the crusted blood near her shoulder, she spoke again, faint and unsteady. "Elias, I need to share something with you." He drew up a chair and settled opposite her. "Go on, I'm all ears." She drew a deep breath, struggling to compose herself. "Roy claims I can't bear him a child. He insists that renders me useless. He declares that faults everything on me." Elias furrowed his brow. "That's a vicious thing to say to a woman." She shook her head. "It's also untrue." Her voice broke. "I found a note from the physician in Wichita, a note Roy concealed. The reality is, I can conceive a child. He cannot. He's known for years." Elias felt the chamber spin for an instant. "So he faulted you?" "Yes. He struck me over it. He bound me for it. He sought to shatter me for it." She brushed her cheek. "Then he headed to town, to boast about pursuing outlaws, so people would view him as some sort of champion." Elias leaned back and dragged a weary palm through his whiskers. His jaw clenched as the revelation settled. Roy had forged his standing on the suffering of others, and his own bride bore the evidence etched into her skin. Lydia regarded him with a look he couldn't quite grasp at first, but it wasn't dread any longer. It wasn't humiliation either. It was nearer to optimism. "Elias," she faltered, "there's one desire I hold, one necessity if I'm to outlast this existence." He leaned in. "Tell me." Her breath quivered. "I want a child." Then her gaze rose and fixed on his. "And I want that child from you." For an instant the world paused, as if the breeze beyond had forgotten its rhythm. Elias felt his breast constrict, not from alarm, but from the burden of her plea. He parted his lips to reply, but Lydia murmured first, "Please say something." "But let me pose this to you. If you stood in Elias's place just now, facing a harmed young lady imploring you for a child, could you turn from that allure?" Elias had no chance to respond, not even a gasp, for that was precisely when a horse whinnied sharply outside and boots thudded on the porch planks with the sort of bold assurance only one soul in Dodge City possessed. Lydia stiffened. Her fingers gripped the chair arms. "He's returned." Her voice scarcely topped a hush. Elias sensed a stir in his belly, that familiar hunch he'd known back when he herded stock through Comanche lands, that subtle alert that peril was marching right for him. The front door burst open. Sheriff Roy Harden filled the frame with a flask in one fist and rage in the other. His shirt hung loose, grit on his boots and a smirk on his lips that faded the instant he spied Elias beside his wife. "Well, well, what have we here? My bride perched all snug and a cattleman built like a bull looming in my kitchen." Roy glared at Lydia, his grin warping. "I step out for a spell and you snag yourself a nursemaid. Is that how it is?" Lydia's breath faltered. "Roy, please, allow me to clarify." "Clarify what?" Roy advanced 2 paces. "Clarify why you appear freshly tended, or why this stranger handles my belongings." Elias advanced, composed yet resolute. She was injured. She required aid. Roy let out a harsh chuckle. She required correction. That's what she craved. A lady should recognize her station. He seized Lydia by the arm. She gasped in pain. Elias gripped Roy's forearm, swift as a flash for a man nearing 50. "Release her." Roy yanked free, stunned that any dared lay a hand on him. "You've taken leave of your senses, Crow. I embody the law here." Elias held his gaze unflinching. "And the law doesn't thrash a woman near to ruin." Roy's features shadowed. "She fed you falsehoods. She always spins tales. And she can't bear me in air. She's naught but vexation." Lydia at last broke. "You know the facts. I read the note. The healer declared you can't sire young ones. Not me, you." Roy blanched, then flushed, then blanched anew. He clawed for his pistol. Elias acted sooner. He knocked the weapon aside and thrust Roy back with such force the sheriff tumbled into the table. Chairs toppled. The flask splintered. Lydia recoiled as if a rifle had fired. Roy hauled himself upright, countenance aflame with mortification. "You've committed the gravest error of your days, Crow." Elias held firm. "Perhaps, but I won't abide while you shatter her once more." Roy daubed blood from his mouth and bared a chill grin. "Then we'll resolve this before the entire settlement. Let them witness who's the deceiver. Let them judge who's worthy of credence." And here's the aspect that gives pause. If the full village assembles to learn the facts, will they heed the sheriff they dread, or the herdsman they rely on? By midday, the entire town had convened. Dodge City ever relished a touch of spectacle, particularly when the lawman was entangled. Residents queued beyond rail posts, murmuring like fowl ahead of a gale. Some rested against rail posts. Some clutched their brims against the blaze. No one grasped the precise events, but all sensed discord. Roy Harden strode in foremost, torso thrust out and vanity mended with sheer hubris. He jabbed a finger at Elias and bellowed clear for half of Kansas to catch. "This fellow assaulted me in my dwelling. He schemed to sway my bride from me." A handful nodded, for it was easier than pondering. Elias entered more deliberately, resolute like a soul with naught to forfeit save his integrity. Lydia lingered at his rear with her cuffs rolled high enough to reveal the marks she could conceal no longer. The chamber hushed when her visage came into view. Even those fond of Roy fidgeted uneasily. Roy pressed ahead. "Recount what you shared with him. Lydia, confess you can't bear me in air." Lydia clasped her hands firmly. "I'll recount the verity." Roy scoffed. "See there, launching into fables from the start." Lydia delved into her pouch with a quivering inhale. She displayed a creased sheet. "This is the missive from the healer in Wichita. I beheld it firsthand. Roy's the one barren of heirs, not I." The assembly stirred. Some inhaled sharply. Some grumbled softly. Roy surged for the sheet, incensed. "You faithless wretch!" Ere he could grasp her, Elias interposed like a bulwark of steel. "If you aim to lash out, aim at me." Roy growled eagerly. He fumbled for his sidearm. What ensued was swift enough to jolt the entire space. Roy scarce enholstered when Elias swatted his knuckles away and unlimbered his own. A lone report echoed through. The slug ripped through Roy's trigger hand and flung his iron skittering over the boards. Voices cried out. Several reeled away. Roy sank to his haunches, cradling his palm and swearing through gritted fangs. "You've destroyed me, Crow!" Elias holstered his piece. "No, you wrought your own downfall." The hall plunged into a stillness that prickled the nape of every listener. A few weathered drovers amid the throng offered measured affirmations, the sort gentlemen bestow when retribution at last overtakes a rogue. The underling wavered, eyeing Roy then the multitude, uncertain if he ought to stir. Only after a drawn sigh did he advance, unsteady as a novice, and place a palm on Roy's tunic. He didn't tear the emblem away. He unfastened it gently, as if dreading its scorch. That instant, all grasped Roy Harden's sway had vanished. Elder Whitaker, the financier who chaired the village board, hawked onto the planks and proclaimed, "Clear for all to heed." "It's over, Roy. That insignia belongs to you no more. Any who dispute can advance and voice it to my countenance." Concluded amid the assembly, divested of authority he never merited, Lydia observed with a blend of apprehension, solace, and a hint of liberation. Elias aided her to rise, his palm firm beneath hers. The chamber buzzed anew, but now the tone shifted, kinder, nearly endorsing. But here's the query to mull now that Roy Harden has tumbled. What unfolds when Lydia and Elias seek to forge an existence Roy can no longer dominate? Roy Harden was finished as lawman before the sun grazed the cottonwood crowns. By dusk, Dodge City had fallen oddly silent, as if the settlement still grappled with the spectacle it beheld. A figure who'd strutted grander than statute had been felled by candor, and a lady who'd bowed her crown for years at last rose erect before all. Residents noted they occasionally spied Roy by the distant rail at twilight, merely a silhouette propped on a stake. Once Elias glimpsed a form gliding behind the cottonwoods by the stream, but upon his hail the shape melted away. Roy appeared inebriated at the tavern more than once, slurring of fresh starts none intended to grant. But each time his gaze strayed toward the homestead, he averted it. Even souls like Roy discern when a brawl is forfeit. Elias escorted Lydia from the hall, one firm palm at her back. The breeze carried scents of earth and sun-warmed grain. Lydia kept darting glances about, no longer fearful, but adrift on where renewal dawns when the prior life perishes amid onlookers. What comes next? Her tone still quavered, though she sought to veil it. Elias scanned the skyline a spell. "Now you draw unburdened air, and you don't tread it solitary." When she relocated to Elias's homestead some weeks hence, the village feigned disinterest, but all peered. A youthful dame and a grazier nigh double her years sparked fine chatter. Folks glimpsed from casements as Lydia drew water. They conferred across their bounds. "Figure he welcomed her over hastily. No lady mends so promptly. And did you note how he regards her?" Some held Elias shielded her solely from duty. Others reckoned the pair had entwined well ere Roy's demise. Verity seldom outpaces hearsay, least of all in a tight-knit hamlet. Yet within that modest abode naught seemed hurried, naught seemed amiss. Elias afforded Lydia room to reclaim her essence. He showed her to repair harness. She sowed blooms by the threshold. Their mirth emerged gently at first, near abashed to resound, then brighter with each fleeting fortnight. By vernal bloom they faced Reverend Russell in the modest chapel at town's fringe. Certain can attended from benevolence. Some arrived to appraise silently from rear benches. A few murmured it premature. A few inclined heads as if they'd foreseen this close. Lydia clenched Elias's palm, anxious beneath those stares. He bent near and breathed, "Let neighbors prattle. They can't fathom the path you traversed to arrive." She beamed amid tears. It neared 3 years post their vows when Lydia clasped Elias's hand one tranquil dusk at the board table. Her words were gentle,
nigh timid of their own promise. "Elias, I believe I'm carrying." For a lengthy beat he merely lingered, eyes agleam, like a soul restored beyond his forfeits. When her form at last swelled, the tattle surged anew. "I warned you, matters stirred ere the lawman toppled." Others wagged heads. "Nay, that babe favors Elias, and Lydia appears as happy in ages." One elder king jested on the delay, and Elias merely grinned and remarked, "Providence held us a tad longer than kin surmise." The verity mellowed even the sternest lips. When the infant at length came, hale and lusty, certain neighbors bore pastries, jars, some bore quilts. A few yet loitered at their rails, observing soundlessly, unresolved if to embrace the joy unfolding. And perhaps therein lies the grace. Existence needn't be perfect to be fine. Mending needn't be hushed to be genuine. And affection requires no village sanction to thrive sturdy. So let me inquire this. If you'd traversed the blaze as they did, would you heed murmurs to halt? Or would you erect the days that ring true in your marrow?
If this closing tale moved you, lend the clip a thumb up so more souls may discover it. And join the list if you'd cherish further earnest yarns from the bygone American frontier.